Welcome to Shareholders of a Better World, brought to you by TBLI Group. At TBLI Group, we have an established reputation as an organization dedicated to building the ecosystem of global sustainability and impact investing. We're doing this through educating, advising, and facilitating transactions in global sustainability and impact business, as well as capital solutions for private companies, family offices, and fund groups. For nearly 25 years, TBLI Group has created a vertically integrated ecosystem of education to action through TBLI conferences and TBLI consulting. More about our company can be found at tbligroup.com. This webinar is brought to you by TBLI Foundation, which hosts educational learning experiences dedicated to a better planet. Through the foundation, we build sustainable communities by sharing the people and the experiences making a difference to so many of our lives around the world. Our weekly podcasts bring impact thought leaders that are doing and not only chatting. Now let me introduce my guest today. Hi. Good afternoon from our studio in Amsterdam. Before I introduce our special guest today, just some housekeeping in case you've never joined us before. If you have a comment, you can type it in the lower left or lower right-hand corner, depending on your screen. There are 3 emojis that you can use for clapping, or if you find something brilliant or funny. And if you need to send a private message to anyone in the room, just move your cursor over their name, and a window will pop up and you can send them a message. So our guest today is an incredibly brilliant guy. People think of curing cancer, and he's been able to keep things going for 20 years. His name is Yarrow Kraner, on getting people to actually commit and be impactful. He's the founder of HATCH and HATCH AI. I'm not going to say too much more about Yarrow because I want him to share his journey with you. Yarrow, if you can turn your mic on and your video on. And for those in the audience that are from another planet and don't know who HATCH is and what you do and how you got this started, share with us your journey and what are you trying to achieve with HATCH. Thank you so much for doing this. I know how early this is in California. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Robert. And it's really a pleasure to be here. We're in our 20th year for HATCH, and it really is a dedicated group of people that are doing this out of passion for hatching a better world. And we do that in a couple different ways. There's 2 main nodes. There's the summits where we convene 100 people at a time. We sort of view those as chemistry sets where we put active combustible ingredients next to each other. The idea being that if you have 100 people in the room and nothing transpires after that, who cares? But if you put 100 people in the room and everyone is leaving with their work accelerated and 3 to 5 collaborations, there is a ripple effect of exponential human potential. We kind of joked that 1 + 1 = 11. And then the other node is HATCH Studios, which houses the Impact Labs. And the Impact Labs are sort of a portfolio of systems change projects that are in constant flow in parallel to everything else that's happening throughout the rest of the year, and looking to sort of meet the world where the needs are in environment, climate, education, equity, emerging issues. And there's a lot of examples of different impact labs that we've done over the years that have yielded sort of systems change policies and at the UN level and things like that.
I was struck by when I looked at some of your alumni of people who've come. This is like some of the very, very big, well-known celebrities, both male and female. How do you get them to come?
Yeah, it's sort of different case by case. More and more, we're really trying to find people that are authentically passionate about specific causes. And then we help build resources and an ecosystem of acceleration around that. In the earlier years and sort of the first few years, I had just moved back to Montana from Los Angeles and relied on a Los Angeles network that I had built from my previous company. And, it had a different flavor. Like we weren't necessarily doing the impact labs yet. We've always been founded on mentorship, what we thought would be sort of top-down mentorship turned into top-down, bottom-up, and peer-to-peer, and the cross-pollination of really diverse industries, domains, perspectives, thinkers, ethnical backgrounds, generations. And that diversity is really what, you're sitting next to an astronaut and a 17-year-old kid who's got 2 patents on turning human waste into electricity. And that diversity is where we started realizing that, wow, you could really aim those perspectives at different challenges and have unexpected solutions for those challenges, because you have not just a bunch of people that look the same or a bunch of people that have the same area of expertise, but more of these kind of wildcard thinkers looking at it from different perspectives, saying, why not and what if? And that started becoming more of our sweet spot, where we started aiming them toward these impact lab challenges.
But I mean, I was looking, like you had Jeff Bridges, you had astronauts, you had artists, you had famous musicians. And first of all, getting them to come to an event is already a huge account, but getting them to actually be willing to engage with others that are not offering them a 5-year film contract. How did you do that? I mean, how do you get them to be willing to engage and share?
You invite. I mean,
yeah, okay, I can invite them, but it doesn't mean they're coming anywhere.
I mean, you invite them, and also I think spend some time learning a little bit more about what they care about and weave that into the invitation. And, in many cases, if you're finding people that are authentically switched on by different causes and you approach that with that lens, sort of meeting them where they're at, that oftentimes you have a good chance of getting a yes. And, over time, I think you start with sort of the bold invitations, and then after a while, you're 1 degree warmer to the next person, and you get to suggest, like, if you don't believe what I'm telling you, believe this friend of yours that's also been.
And one of the issues that a lot of conferences face, which became more clear since we stopped doing ours, is that you have nice conversations, there's a selfie and the photo op and this, but nothing ever happens afterwards. People don't respond. How do you keep the engagement going?
That is always sort of a tricky proposition for any event creator and host and so forth. And one of the ways that we do it is we set a sort of a series of cultural agreements at the very beginning of each summit. And one of those agreements is accountability and follow through. And, we sort of describe that, like, you're going to meet a bunch of really inspiring people in the next few days. You might have a couple of cocktails. You might make a couple of promises because you're excited about everything that people are doing. But don't make a promise you can't keep. Like, really consider your bandwidth when you go back to work next Monday. And if you only got 2 or 3 things that you can follow through on, save them up and be really judicious about how you create those invitations to make an introduction or help someone, because that layer of accountability is really what builds the trust container around a community in that peer-to-peer acceleration. Like, we oftentimes sort of use the metaphor of mycelium, which is the large organism under forest floors that connect all these forests. It's the largest organism in the world, exchanging nutrients and wisdom. And if there's a fault line in that mycelial network, then the whole system fails. And so we paint that picture and then invite people to really, lean into the peer-to-peer acceleration. And it starts on day one with a series of exercises that we do around each individual's work and how we can help accelerate and aggregate resources around that.
But you actually asked them to sign a contract with you guys to deliver on something, because I've always struggled with getting people to engage and share. Some are willing to do it, others are not. And you've been doing this, 20 years, and then other, special do tanks that you set up. So you found something, you've cured cancer, you've found the secret sauce. So is it mainly about curating who can come? Is it very, are you really careful as who you're letting into the meeting? Because I imagine there's probably entrepreneurs who are looking to raise money, and they see a Hollywood celebrity. Hey, you want to invest in my, my deal over here?
I mean, I think that's a big part of it, honestly, is the curation and the intentionality and finding people that, like, we're not curing cancer, but we're finding people that are. And when you put those people next to each other who are solving the unsolvable in their own vertical or discipline or industry, and you put them next to each other, there's a curiosity of where everyone's leaning in and learning from each other. And you get the composer talking to the astronaut and all these really interesting dynamics that occur. That's when we started to realize it was sort of a 360-degree mentorship that was occurring. And, it used to be like, it wasn't always sort of a curated, it was more of a festival model in the early days, 20 years ago, where we were still curating and inviting people, but then there was the general public. And I was always sort of struck by, like, who, even within the community of the small town of Bozeman, Montana, like, we couldn't get professors from the university to show up, or I was always like worrying about who's not in the room. And finally, one year I just had this sort of flip of, like, let's stop worrying about who's not in the room and really think about who's in the room. And from a sort of values perspective, it was hard for me to create what started feeling suddenly exclusive, because you're making it so invite only. And yet that's what started building the container where everyone started feeling like they're in this bubble of trust and accountability and follow through. And so I just sort of had to switch the lens for myself, and that it's not exclusive. It's just, it's intentional. And I think that's a really key aspect to getting people to follow through with each other, is just that putting the premium on the relationship building. We also cap it at a certain number, so it's not so unwieldy that you're walking around 1,000 people. Like, we cap it at a pretty intimate, between 100 and 135 people.
So you offer exclusivity with inclusiveness.
Yes. And it's also inclusive to the point where we don't want the finances to be the barrier of entry. For every, we bundle all the hard costs and just put like a small margin on top of that goes into a scholarship fund that helps create partial scholarships for people that are in, artists or social impact. And we want to sort of level the playing field in that aspect. The summits are not necessarily our profit center. They're break even. We are able to pay our team through the Impact Lab work that we do with these organizations, brands, foundations, universities that we partner with on these big challenges.
Tell the people listening, how do the labs work? What is the function of them? And give some example of some labs themes that you've developed. They're very much do labs. It's not, it's not a selfie connector. It's very much there's a challenge that you try to address within the time frame that you're together.
Yeah, and during the summits there are these lab sprint tracks that are sometimes just a piece of a larger impact lab. But a couple examples of impact labs. There's sort of a wide range. I'll give you a couple of different examples, but we partnered with a coalition of 8 universities to reimagine the future of education to make it more equitable and accessible to get a degree. And that was like, a 9-month project that yielded some really interesting results and that are being implemented. We've partnered with, the largest toy company in the world to invite them to think of a different lens on getting not just toys in the hands of children, but toys of tools of critical thinking and problem solving in the hands of future leaders. It's just a different way of leveraging their same distribution channel, but thinking about 25 years from now, how different that legacy of that company would be if they were feeding intellectual property catalysts to next generation leaders. In 2019, we partnered with an expeditions group called Soul Buffalo, on bringing 160 executives from some of the largest creators of plastics in the world, because all these microplastics are being ground up into in the ocean and like evaporating, precipitated, and ended up in our food streams and so forth. And so we took, Dow Chemical, Nestle, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, a bunch of others onto a boat with these previously adversarial relationships, and like Greenpeace, Ocean Conservancy, World Wildlife Fund. And of course, the design challenge is like, how do you get $300 billion of industry and these NGOs that are trying to stop their progress and take them down, like very opposed agendas, to come at this with a human challenge lens and not an agenda-based lens. And so we got them in the water. We sliced open fish, showed plastics in the fish. A cello starts playing when they get back on board, and we take them to 30 years in the future, and we have them write themselves letters about what they did specifically to be a part of the solution for that challenge. And we give that about 5 minutes and say, by the way, when you're done writing these letters, we're going to collect them and send them to your families. And so your kids can read them. So there's a layer of accountability there. And there's like, you can hear a pin drop, and people start writing again, like tears are welling up in their eyes. And we had all these different impact lab sprints on the boat, 16 of them, 14 of them ended up becoming funded. And that led to the signing of the Ocean Plastics Treaty by the UN in March of last year. There's other instances where we're like working with students to create a student bill of rights in the second largest school district in the US, and done voter mobilization issues and other, like the impact labs are, there's another one we're working on right now where last fall we took 50 sort of change makers down the Nile in Egypt to the origins of feminism, and to have discussions around how to rebalance masculine and feminine energy in the world of business and technology. And as I was posting content from those conversations and dialogues, someone reached out to me, a woman named Shelley Eskew from the Female Quotient, and said, the World Economic Forum said it would take 132 years to close the gender barrier in the workplace. And I'm thinking to myself, 132 years, like think about what happened in the last 132. And so we were working with them to prove that we can close that gender barrier in less than 5 years with 10 of the Fortune 50 CEOs on these 10 different metrics. And so those are some examples of the impact labs, and they're wide ranging, but they're all really geared toward hatching a better world. I guess there's one last thing I'll just mention. There's 5 planetary tipping points. One of those is the Amazon basin. A third of the world's fresh water comes from the Amazon, gets shipped through the rivers in the sky to North America, Africa, Europe, and so forth. But it works optimally when it's at 80% coverage in that basin. It's currently at 30%, and if it hits 25%, that's a point of no return. Can't resuscitate itself, and it's on its way to becoming a desert in 35 to 40 years. And so we're working with a group on how to work on the debt alleviation, where all the presidents of these countries are offloading land for these extractive purposes. And instead of large organizations and companies like automobile and electronics companies buying carbon offsets, there's an opportunity to sort of crowdsource the debt alleviation of the Amazon, because once that planetary tipping point flips, it impacts the other 4 drastically. So anyway, those are a few examples, Robert.
And these kind of pay the bills. So you're basically a not for loss, trying to cover the costs from the summits and these do tanks. But you go much further. You're not just taking sponsor money. You're also writing to the sponsor's family, dude. This is what your dad thinks about here. So you're going much further than just a simple do tank. You're really trying to push all of those that are either funding it or involved to really get something done. Do you think that it can work on most subjects, or is it always based on who will underwrite the cost so that you can bring everyone together?
Well, that's a multi-layered question. I mean, yes, I'm an optimist, and I do think it can work on every sort of vertical. And like, we need to. One of the things that was really remarkable about the ocean plastics boat is watching these different sides grow empathy for each other. Watching these NGOs really understanding like how complex supply chains are, and to just make one small shift into their supply chain is a significant ripple effect. That being said, I was talking to a woman, Atosa Sotani, who's the founder of Amazon Watch, and she's like, developed countries sort of respond to one threat, and that's the threat of war. And we need to mobilize at the pace of war if we're going to, create sustainability for the humanity long term. And that's kind of a harrowing notion. And when you start to think about how the Department of Defense and various different countries mobilize, if we can think about climate change as more of an existential threat that's here right now. I remember there was a meme floating around when COVID first hit, is like, climate change needs to hire COVID's PR firm. And because everything just instantly stopped, and like, who would have thought that every industry in the world could grind to a halt in 8 days? Previously would have thought impossible. If I would have said, Robert, every industry is going to grind to a halt in 8 days, you'd be like, you're crazy. And then it happens, and it's like, well, what else is possible? I mean, that just opened the door for possibility. And so I guess the last piece that I'll say, I had a really fun and interesting conversation in the middle of COVID with John Hagel, who was many, many years at Deloitte. He's like an old school mentor to so many, Silicon Valley CEOs. And during COVID, and I was like, John, are all of your CEO clients calling you? And he said, yes. I'm like, well, what are they asking? He's like, how to get back to normal. I'm like, well, what do you say to them? He's like, well, not to get back to normal because normal was broken. I'm like, that's beautiful. So how do we transform these massive institutions? And he's like, you don't transform institutions, you transform the leaders within those institutions. So the reminder is, like, at the top of all of these different companies are human beings with families, with, that need to be addressed with those things in mind, but also with an empathy lens on how complicated it is to run large organizations, and then to create these sort of aspirationally based storylines where, hey, if we do this, then this is possible for everyone, for your stakeholders, for, the other piece I'll just mention in that kind of area of the conversation is this next generation is so purpose and impact driven, and they're sort of like, they're all born with this reality check on where we're at with the climate in the world right now. And purpose and impact is now becoming a competitive landscape for onboarding talent, which is, for those of us in the impact space for 20 years, it's like, whew, all right, there's like all these monetary and, kind of HR tethered data points now around impact and purpose. If we don't create those on-ramps from big companies and organizations for their employee base to activate, then they're going to lose out on that talent to the other organizations that do.
What are some of the topics that you still are trying to develop as these labs, but it might take a lot longer in trying to get an underwriter to be able to collect all these people that you're still working on, but you would like to do maybe the next year or the year after?
Well, the one around the Amazon basin is a sticky one. It's complex. It does involve a lot of like financial institutions from multiple countries, and it's just like, it's a multi-stakeholder engagement that is going to take a while. On the flip side, well, not on the flip side, almost like on the same side of complexity is like food systems, and in multiple ways. Like, we're doing a Hatch summit in Europe in 3 weeks in Switzerland, and we're also doing one in the heartland in the middle of the US. I mean, if you look at electoral map and you see 2 blue coasts and a red center, what's been nicknamed flyover country, there's a lot of really interesting innovators happening that are in the heartland and flyover country that are sort of feeling unseen and unheard, 95% of all VC funding goes to California, New York, and Massachusetts. And yet there's like this massive breadbasket of farming and agriculture and industry, in addition to lots of other things. But that specifically, like, we're going there to work on, bridging the divide between diverse perspectives, rebuilding civic trust in all these different verticals, and then looking to really try to accelerate positive change within the food and ag industry, regenerative farming, soil sequestration, like healthier soils. There's like two really main components to how we can draw the carbon down. There's multiple. I mean, Project Drawdown, which was the book that was sort of researched and created by Paul Hawken and Amanda Joy Ravenhill, is a fantastic resource. But tree reforestation and healthier soils. If you've seen the film Kiss the Ground, it's a phenomenal film, really well produced by the nonprofit named Kiss the Ground. But it mathematically shows you at the 1 hour mark how it's possible to draw down this carbon that's already been released into the atmosphere. And the one last piece I'll just mention on that is that we had a pretty sobering conversation with one of the folks in the Hatch Network in one of our virtual convenings called the Global Living Room, with a woman named Michelle Thaler, who is an astrophysicist, astronaut, and the head of communications for Goddard Space Center for NASA. And she sort of illustrated a bunch of data that had been gathered over the last 30 years and released from NASA, that the 2 to 4 foot ocean rise that's been projected to happen in our world 200 years from now has been moved up to happen within the end of the centuries, within the lifetime of our children. 2 to 4 foot ocean rise. Now, if you see a graphic visualization of what that means for everyone in the world that's living on coasts, it's going to put like billions and billions of people into climate migration, and suddenly that's happening, everywhere in the world. That's just with the carbon that's already been released into the atmosphere. It's like if we just suddenly magically stopped releasing carbon, like 2 to 4 foot ocean rise is inevitable, unless we really start dedicating resources toward giving subsidies to healthier soils as opposed to pesticide and sick soils. Europe is way ahead of U.S. in this regard. Sorry, that was a long answer, Robert.
Oh, no, not at all. Not take all the time that you want, because I agree with you. I would think that the whole regenerative agriculture as a carbon drawdown, there is nothing cheaper, faster, quicker, more effective, with a longer track record, yet it's not getting funded at all. Nearly 100% of all of the money into the climate tech funds that have been raised from Texas Pacific Group, Generation, Al Gore's fund, General Atlantic, and the 30-odd other ones, none of them are investing at all in agriculture. They're all looking for unicorns, and they're all looking for direct air capture. It's like taking a thimble to the Atlantic Ocean and say, I'm going to move it. And so none of them are going to impact carbon drawdown in the short term. None. Yet they've sucked up all of the money. So getting that message across about this, that it improves the livelihood of the smallholder farmer, it restores the health of the soil, draws down carbon, and let's create some type of financial mechanism that the farmers benefit from that. I'm totally on board for that, but I also see the conversations that I have with investors pretending to be serious about climate, and they say we do regenerative agriculture, but then they invest in 10-minute bicycle deliveries for a supermarket like Getir or Gorillas or whatever it's called in San Francisco. Doesn't that, because you're quite chill. You don't seem to get very upset. I get very upset when dealing with these barbarians. Do you?
Yes and no. There's like moments of sort of existential threat despair that keep me up at night every once in a while, but also just kind of recognize that we have this life force that is a limited resource, just like time. and how we point it, what we like. I don't spend too much energy trying to get wound up and stressed out, because it just sort of leads to feeling helpless and not being able to do anything. And it's like reminds me of the old parable of the kid walking across the shoreline, and there's like thousands and thousands of starfish just like lying there about to die, and he's like throwing them back in, and the guy's like, it's not going to matter, and he's like, well, it did for that one.
Yeah.
And like Jane Goodall has this like fantastic quote of, thousands of years from now, a species very much like our own but more evolved will look back and wonder how we let all these other species die, and yet there's so much more worth fighting for. If we fall into apathy, we're done. And hope is the engine. And so I mean, yeah, I get upset, but I'm also just trying to keep a healthy outlook on what I have the opportunity to do and who I do it with. And
you're for the people who don't know, you're a very generous person with your time and your effort in helping and supporting others. How can people help you?
I mean, we're always looking for project underwriters, but that seems to be pretty much everyone's challenge. So, working with brands and foundations that are motivated to solve these challenges, and also people that are doing good work in the world that want to come join up with a community that is doing, that is on the kind of the front edge of a lot of these challenges. Hatchexperience.org is the website. And those are kind of the two things. It's like people, and impact, and the funding to mobilize that.
You also created something. I don't know if it's still in beta or if it's already launched, of this kind of this tool for your phone of being able to find lots of solutions, partners, strategic partners, ideas, so kind of like a Swiss Army knife for your phone, an ultimate CRM system for sustainability. Is that operational?
It is operational. We actually we took 5 years to build it. We raised 1.2 million, spent all of it on development. Neither myself or the co-founder took a salary from that. And ironically, just like a lot of other startup stories, right as we got done with our final and most solid build, we ran out of some funding, and we're now raising just a little bit more to hire a CEO to run it. But it's called H360, and the H stands for humanity, and it uses AI, machine learning, to matchmake people to each other around specific challenges, needs to solutions, and you can use these different filters to stack to figure out who's working in what lanes.
Is the website h360.ai?
Yes.
Okay. Someone asked.
Which is a little bit mysterious. There's not a whole lot there. You can put your name in there for being interested in
AI.
And ultimately, like, there's some really wonderful use cases. Companies have expressed interest in utilizing it for employee engagement and workforce mobilization. There's companies that we're talking to that have 110,000 employees that are serviced by a small group of like 5 to 10 people in a CSR room, trying to match their employees to projects of impact and giving them that sort of easy on-ramp. And that automates this. And so you fill out your profile, things that you're passionate about, and it starts bringing you a queue of things that you're interested in. And conversely, impact communities like Hatch and others, you can sort of tap into the full human potential within your own organization to see who has different skill sets and passions and so forth, and it starts to match them to projects and each other. So, I mean, the original inspiration was like, how do I sort of remove myself from being the bottleneck for this 20-year, network or community of Hatch, and like, hey, Robert, you should meet so-and-so because you're working on X, Y, and Z, and this person has a skill set. And that constant sort of matchmaking that a lot of people do within their own companies or organizations, how can you automate that in a way using, modern tools to make the introductions? And I guess the final use case that I'll mention is that there's a real, the UN has like a database of 850,000 some SDG tagged projects that do not communicate with each other. And with this tech, you'd be able to type in a couple filters and see who's working in what space, where there's redundancy of duplication of efforts, and where you can sort of streamline collaborations. And ultimately, I can imagine if you're able to make, $100 go 100 times more based on understanding who's working in what space and how you can sort of help accelerate the progress there.
What is, I think I put the wrong website. Could you type in the comments area the exact website? Because I'm getting a 404 error message. H at the lower right or lower left-hand corner in the comments.
I'll just put my email address in here in case anybody has wants to learn more. I think that right now that website is going through a new iteration.
Okay, that's great, because that would be a really amazing tool. So the ultimate dating site for meeting people, not so much for dating, but for personal fulfillment.
Yeah, it's like Tinder meets LinkedIn for impact and collaboration.
Different type of happy ending. And
yeah.
You have 3 summits coming up, which are already quite amazing that you're doing that. Do you like prevent previous alumni from coming too often, or is it often new people coming all the time, or you want to kind of curate that? Well, let's get an astronaut here, and let's get a music person. I didn't see any politicians though, or lobbyists from the alumni.
Well, there's a few different questions in that. I'll work backwards. Historically, we have sort of really tried to stay nonpartisan, and that, of course, as the environment and climate is becoming more politicized, that's becoming increasingly difficult for us. We do engage with people that are actively involved in policy making, specifically around like climate and equity and things like that. But and also, at the end of the summit of each summit, we actually ask people, who feels like they're leaving with value, and they're glad they came and would want to come again, and everyone raises their hand. And we're like, well, that's amazing, and we want you back, but we can't have everyone come every year because it would be the same people. Right. And so the most value to you as attendees, as guests, as part of this network now, is the network. And so our goal, our job is really to keep growing that network. And so we cap returning alumni, but then we also create another invitation for Hatch reunions and these other excursions, like the one that we did, in Egypt and other places. So we create a target-rich environment for a lot of alumni to continue to engage and connect. Dinners around the world, and these impact lab projects that people have an opportunity to engage in. And then there are alumni that come back to each of these summits, but we just sort of try to cap it so that there's a Hatch 100 plus a layer of people that are working on really cool things together.
I'm really impressed with the level of curation that you try to do. That you try to create this kind of bouillabaisse where everyone is a different seasoning, which creates a nice flavor. That's what we always tried to do in the past. It was just always a challenge making it work financially, because the only way in our sector is that unless we promise we're going to put you next to Jeff Bezos for the weekend, or Elon Musk or some other billionaire, people often didn't want to sponsor, and it only became worse after the financial crisis. So here people are coming not specifically about looking to raise money, because it's really geared for that. It's really about kind of mutually helping each other.
Yeah, it's a peer-to-peer reciprocation acceleration. And, we do often are asked, like, well, I'm considering coming. Send me a list of who the speakers are.
Yeah,
like, well, we don't do that. We don't send a list of who's coming ahead of time. and then, there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is security. One of the reasons is that we don't want that to be your reason for coming. Like, we've already sort of articulated the value prop. And if that fits with your own sort of values and what's important for you in this stage of life right now, then now is the time. And if not, then maybe come back in the future. We do release the full cohort once it's built out a week and a half prior to people arriving, so they can kind of get to know each other and do a little bit of the intro stuff front loaded. But we don't lead with the marquee names. We're also not, obsessed with like who's the celebrity in the room. We're trying to just find people that are authentically working on projects that can move the needle on hatching a better world.
Yeah, we do a retreat once in a while. We're doing one in September. And I know the minute somebody asks me who else is coming, they're not the right person to attend because they just want to consume and they don't want to share. It's all about transactions for them. And yours is definitely not a transactional place. Is there any one person that you would love to get and have really been challenged to get there? How about Ari Emanuel?
Ari Emanuel is my agent when I was in Los Angeles for a brief amount of time. He's an amazingly powerful individual. I don't know that he's going to fit well within the chemistry set of Hatch. He's got a very singular purpose. But there are a lot of people that I would love to have in the room, and Jeffrey Sachs, one of the authors of the SDGs, is one of those. Paul Pullman is another one that I'm sort of circling around right now. And then, of course, there's some of the larger funder names in the world that I would love to sort of have exposure to and expose them to the work that Hatch is doing. And it's not just Hatch. Hatch is ultimately a sum of the parts of all the people that we're finding that are doing really like amazing work. And like, we want to matchmake. We want to be a conduit for that, the work that's underfunded. I mean, the stuff that Mackenzie Bezos is doing right, or Mackenzie Scott rather, is stunningly.
Oop, you froze.
Aspects of her philanthropy is like, I'd love to get in front of Mackenzie.
Yeah, me too. She doesn't have a website, and the agency that she uses on the East Coast is not very open for engaging there. So, but I hear that's quite an inspiring. But let's say somebody has a really cool project, like one of the people in this panel is trying to help the Maasai in Kenya with their IP, because all of the luxury brands are using their IP, their culture, their clothing, etc., and basically selling that for lots of money, but very little goes back to the Maasai. If people have that type of issue, is Hatch the right place to go to engage with others to find solutions and collectively?
I mean, potentially. It really sort of depends on the who and the what and all that things. I mean, I love talking with people that are doing amazing work in the world, and each summit is a little bit of a standalone in terms of where it's being held, what that location or environment inspires in terms of topics and themes. Some are more attuned to like displaced people and climate displacement. Some are more attuned to, the heartland, like food and ag systems and so forth. So, I mean, we have an application button on the front page of the hatchexperience.org website where people that have interest can click a button and we end up setting up an interview and chatting. But there's a lot of ways that people can get involved. It's not all just about the summit. There's ways that we can tether people into the global living rooms and other virtual convenings, and we try to create as many invitations as possible.
Um, when I heard what you were doing for such a long time, and the passion and energy that you're still able to do that and constantly innovate, I was really quite impressed and amazed. How do you keep the fires burning, within you to keep doing this?
Well, I mean, one, it just feels sort of necessary. And there's another piece to it as well. I believe that I had this realization, I don't know, like 9 years ago. I was raised by a single parent mom, only child, just her and I, my whole life, essentially, until she got remarried when I was 19. But it's a family. Like, as this community grows, I just sort of realized that I get to curate some of the most brilliant and heartfelt, like high on accomplishment, low on ego, human beings and individuals that I've ever met into this, what feels like this extended family for everyone. And that's just like a real, self-fulfilling component to it, where I just feel surrounded by brilliance. I'm like always learning. I mean, that keeps me moving forward. It's just like I have an increasingly like growing thirst for learning and knowledge, like much more so than even when I was going to university. At this point, I get to learn from some of the most brilliant people in the world.
Are you do you have any plans to do any Hatch event or summit or experience or lab in Asia?
For sure. Yeah, we're sort of in preliminary exploration right now to do something in most likely Japan.
Oh, okay. And next year?
Possibly. A few things would have to fall into place for that to happen, but 2024, 2025, it's a bandwidth capacity issue. Like, we're really motivated right now to do something in the Amazon, similar to what we do with ocean plastics, like bringing people right to the front lines of that extraction, engaging a bunch of the indigenous leaders. There's a few sort of topic focused summits that we want to do next year, and then we'll probably end up moving a little bit, to other aspects as well. And by the way, where you live in Amsterdam, we're engaged with a couple of folks at the city level. They're a really progressive city that's working on all sorts of incubating a lot of ideas around how to create a blueprint for the most accessible city, inclusive city. One of our Hatch community members, Dr. Victor Pineda, who's the president and founder of an organization called World Enabled, is in a wheelchair, and he's an advocate on behalf of folks that are that need more accessibility in the world. And we paired him up with an amazing woman named Kim Dabbs, who works at a company called Steelcase, but she's also a design thinking expert. And they built out a playbook for Inclusive Cities 100. And Amsterdam is looking to be one of the cities that will implement some of these prototype solutions. And so I just wanted to give, where you're living right now, it's a really progressive town, and we're looking to do more work there.
Okay, if we can help you in any way, let me know. Tanuja had a question. The zeitgeist seems to have shifted toward these sort of conversations. Would you speak to what you are seeing and how it has or has not changed your work?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There's a paradigm shift that's occurring, and potentially not fast enough yet. But the company that I started in '99 and 2003 ended up becoming a social network pre-Facebook and MySpace, based on finding and connecting real life superheroes, and then gamifying, like, how do you save the world? Start with where you are, type in your zip code, like, take your superpowers to the world, and gamifying sort of community engagement. And when we were having conversations with studios around that, we were getting blank stares, like, who cares about a lot of the terms we were using and so forth. Robert and I had this conversation when we first met, how the kind of impact and purpose, and that the terminology sort of has shifted in awareness. And then it kind of went through a phase of like almost corporate obligation. And now it's moving past obligation into necessity, because it's, again, it's being sort of driven by an economic lens of the competitive landscape of talent and recruitment of that next generation talent that is so purpose driven. But, like the companies that are coming to the table, and I think what sort of moved from obligation into like, hey, this is actually really critical. We're in that mode right now, and companies are really waking up and finding leaders within those organizations that are starting to become. I've had some just like, inspiring conversations with leaders in a lot of big institutions and, tech, finance, et cetera, that are having this sort of shift of consciousness. And I guess my only hope is that it happens, that is an exponential sort of a hockey stick shift, so to speak, of awareness and action.
Well, I have to really congratulate you on all of the incredible work that you're doing. And I need to repeat again, if there's anything that the audience that's watching this live, or those that will watch a replay, because usually about a couple hours after the event, we send out the link to the replay. And if you want me to add anything about, other than the link to your website or any reports or anything, if people want to apply to be potentially invited for your summit, just send me an email. Get some sleep. I woke you up really early for this, so I apologize for that. But if there's anything specific that we can help you, or that you want me to communicate to those who are want to watch the event again live, just the tape, just let me know, and we'll add that to there. But congratulations on a really great run. I admire your energy for doing this. I just don't have the energy anymore to do these summits, because it was always such a struggle. I mean, when they were over, it was great, and you have lots of energy to do that. But great job. And I think that the app, from what I saw, little bits and pieces of it when you were showing that presentation, that's very, very impressive. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of people using that. So again, thank you. I just want to. Did you have any final words for the audience?
No, I mean, Robert, thank you for the work that you've been doing your whole life. You've been at the forefront of this for a really long time, and that's how I found you. I read about the work that you've dedicated your life to and reached out to you, and that's how we created this relationship. So even though I know that currently you're saying you're a little bit exhausted from doing the summits and so forth, you're still doing amazing work in the world, and so I appreciate your efforts and bringing folks like me and others to your platform.
It's a joy. Let me take a quick group selfie to prove that we were actually doing something today, to appease Martha Stewart, who hates people working from remote. What is this obsession with all these people chasing after people who are working remote? Just wave to the camera and it will make a photo of you. I need to thank our entire, particularly Yarrow, very, very much for doing this. I want to thank our entire production crew, Sam, our producer, Crypto Genius and Ramen Critic, Ricky, my absolute better half with no filter, Xi Jinping, our head of transparency and integrity, Vladimir Putin, our head of conflict resolution, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Nobel Prize winner for stupidity, Elon Musk, our humility coach, and Donald Trump, our prison inmate fashion advisor. So thank you all very, very much. If you want to wave to the camera, and this will make a kind of card with all of the various photos of everyone, and I will, send that out. Okay, this is finished. Good. Thank you. Rendering. And we will start a brief mixer. You're more than welcome to stay if you want to go back to sleep. I'll understand that too. But we'll start this mixer, and you'll be connected for a 5-minute video chat. Yarrow, thank you so much. If I don't connect with you in the mixer, and if you want to get some sleep, thank you again. You're a star.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Thank you all for showing up.
Okay, let's start this. thank you all for coming, those who are still in the room, and I hope to see you all at our next event. And if you haven't checked out the Better World Prize, please do. I'll send out the mailing with the link for the replay to everyone. Stay well. Be good. Okay. This.